Hello, and welcome to another episode. Today we are working on the walk cycle, which is a staple of character animation. This is very important. It is a fundamental. It covers a lot of the basic principles, all tied into one action. So, before we start, this isn't sponsored, I would like to point out one of my favorite books that taught me a lot about how to do walk cycles was The Animator's Survival Kit by Richard Williams, the guy who did The Thief and the Cobbler, if you've seen that. Incredible movie, by the way. The guy who did Who Framed Roger Rabbit, that guy. Good movie, watch it. I recommend this book for this specifically, the walk cycle, and any of the other exercises I've done, because I could not possibly cover this as well as he did in his book. He's got like 50 pages just on the walk cycle. Anyway, on with the video. There are some fundamentals to the walk cycle that are key to establishing a good baseline, and then from there you can experiment and play with it to really give your character. So, we're going to work at a baseline of 8 frames, 4 keyframes, and each frame is going to be on 2s at 24 frames a second. Just for now, all you need to know is you're going to have 4 main drawings for the poses of the walk cycle. You're going to have a contact, a down, a passing, and an up, in that order. So first you would want to draw the contact to establish the baseline. The contact is about the middle where the head positioning will be. So if we have a center line, not a straight line, if we have a center line, your head would only reach here. The top of the head would be the center line, and this would be the contact. And so from here, the up would be above the center line, and the down would be far below the center line. We're going to focus on drawing the head, the torso, and the legs. I'll probably make the arms an afterthought just to deliver the full idea, but the arms are not integral for the main poses of the walk cycle. It's mostly the legs, the torso, and the head. So, starting with the contact, we'll draw a simple character, torso, head, and legs. So for the contact, you want the legs to be contacting the ground. Both feet are in contact. So, it's called the contact because the front leg has just made contact with the ground. That is how you know which pose you're on. So from the contact, you would go to the down, because you are now putting the full weight of your character onto that front leg. And I'm going to exaggerate this quite a bit. I like to start when I'm drawing the next frame. I start with the head, just because that is kind of the center point. I know it's not literally the center point of the character, but it is the center point of the motion. That's what's delivering this action. So the foot would stay here in contact with where the heel is. You don't want the heel to drag. Something I will point out is that I will be moving the character along the screen as if they are making contact. So I will keep the feet where they are making contact with each other on each successive frame to make sure that my character is not sliding. That's something that comes up quite often in animation, is that people will draw their character and try and get a stationary walk cycle, when you should be drawing the character as if they're moving so that you can really feel where they're going. You can see exactly how they'll be moving through space, and then you move the camera in reference to that, or you can reposition the frames. Anyway, so on the down is the head's lowest extreme. The toe and the foot come down from the contact right here. I like to have a very extreme difference between the contact, the toe being pretty high up and then slapping down. That's an aesthetic choice. It's not essential that you do that. It's just something I've picked up, is I like the punch of the slap down on the ground with the toes. And then for the in-between, you can do like a smear from like there. It might look nice. The back leg will bend. Oops. Back leg will bend. Toes still in contact with the ground, but the heel is starting to come up. Like so. Down. Might even exaggerate that a little more. It's not essential. This is rough. This is a rough. So there's my down. Then we do a passing, which is, it's called the passing because your back leg is passing the front leg and it is becoming the front leg. So the passing is usually about even, if not a little bit higher than the contact, positioning for the head. Depending on how you want your character to be acting, you could lead with the chest, you could lead with the head. None of that is super important as of now. That is more of an acting choice. But what is most important is that you will want to show that transfer of weight from the front leg to the new front leg. So I would recommend that you show that this back leg is now either leading, it is in the front, and it is starting to be what is propelling you forward. You're essentially in a walk cycle. You are controlled falling. You're moving forward, your head is leading, and your legs are just kind of keeping up. That's also a design choice, but that's kind of how to dumb down the experience of walking is just controlled falling. Falling with style. You want to show the weight distribution from that front leg to the new front leg, and that is leading, and your character is leaning in to then put all their weight onto that one in the next contact. Something of note that I would say is that if you really want to sell this secondary action, you can show that the toe is kind of lagging behind. You can make it a little floppy at the ankle. That's not really how we walk, but it does kind of sell the dragging motion. It's almost a smear frame. It helps the eye retain where it was coming from. And you can refine that with whatever in between you draw, but just as a basis, it's kind of good to have that foot dragging to show the full force of that front leg. Again, this is just a basic one. The rest of what happens is exclusively character acting, so you get to choose what you want to sell. So you don't have to lead with the legs, you don't have to lead with the torso, you don't have to lead with the head. You can do whatever you want. This is just a baseline. I'm not trying to tell you how to live your life or do your walk cycle. Do it how you want. Have fun. But have fun how I tell you to. Anyway, here's the up. The up is the highest point in these four extremes, and this is where your legs, your contact leg, is probably down. You can have maybe the ball of your feet be down. Let's do the ball of my foot. Like that. And I like to over-exaggerate the stepping action. Having it go maybe 90-degree angle would be a little more realistic, probably even less. I don't know how much you pick up your feet when you walk. If you need reference, record yourself walking from the side, a side perspective. Figure out how you walk. Try and do that. But this would be an exaggerated walk. He's really getting it. If in reality it's probably more like there, but I like to. I'm a cartoonist. Going big. So there's my up. So those are my four main poses. Something else to keep in mind is that while you are moving through these poses, keeping in mind the timing of them, and noting that if you want something to move faster, if you really want to make them, they're full of energy, maybe they're going really excitedly up until that up, I would put the frames leading up to the up more close together and spread maybe the contact and the up farther apart. Just keep in mind the timing depending on what it is you're trying to sell. So that being said, these are the four poses. Contact, down, passing, up. I'll turn off the onion skin so you can I'll write them out too. Contact, feet are contacting the ground. I know they're contacting here, not the point. Down, you are fully down. This is the lowest point that your head will be at. The passing, your back leg is now passing to becoming the front leg, and your weight is switching to leading with that leg. And then the up, where your leg is at the highest point, your head is at the highest point. and you are leading into a contact. So from there, I like to just do basic in-betweens for each of these. I'm gonna get rid of these. I got rid of that one. I like to do just basic in-betweens, a straight in-between, if you will, which would be the exact middle point of each of these using the onion skin tool. And just going through and drawing each of these frames as if it was the exact center using my best guess. And that is me taking some creative liberty and doing a bit of a smear frame there, holding that up so then it slaps down even harder. Bah, like that. Just personal preference. Again, keeping in mind that if you wanted to, you could make these a little bit slower, a little bit faster, based on where you place the head and the torso. The legs play a part in that as well, but you get the idea. Get rid of that. At this point, I would say probably like there for the foot. It's about to come up, and then it's off. Foot's starting to come around at this point. It's flicking up from here to there, maybe even doing a smear there, maybe have it bent still there. And then for the final one, you want to take the contact and put this a little bit farther, because this is now going to become the in-between from the up to the contact. And let me do that so I can see. I can track my foot. I can see where my toes are touching. So the idea with the walk cycle being that you want the walk to cycle into itself, and in reality, you won't have to draw a second set of these, because you can just make it look as though the back leg is now the front leg. If you were to fully flesh this out, you could just put the opposite leg in shadow, and so you might just do that with the coloring rather than having to go through and draw entirely new frames. But if you have an asymmetrical character or an asymmetrical walk cycle, then you would have to draw all, I guess it would be 8 keyframes and then 4 more in-betweens. So if you want to keep it simple, just do these 4, do the 4 in-betweens. You have 8 total drawings, double them up. You're doing it on 2s, and it looks great. So here we're gonna do in-between for the contact and the up. There. Maybe a little snappy. That lagging toe. Bah. Actually, that might not read well because I have it stopped. So if it stops dead in its tracks there, might not look great. We'll play through it, see what happens. Okay. So here's the walk cycle. It's a little snappy there on that final one. The up and the contact are very extreme from each other, but I kind of like it. He's stomping a little bit. I can add some arms real quick just to deliver. If you've ever paid attention while you're walking, often your lead arm and your lead leg are alternating. So if your left arm is forward, your left leg is probably behind. It's two-dimensional, you can't really tell. Just something to keep in mind. Very basic arms, swinging through. There's no standard on this that I'm aware of, so have fun with it. Maybe keep track of the drag of the arms. Since this is the front arm and it's swinging backwards, maybe it drags like that. Like that, maybe. Alright, the arms aren't great. It's fine. The arms aren't important to me right now. What's important is the head and the feet and the legs. Torso's kind of secondary as well. I'll play this without the camera so you can see that the feet aren't sliding anywhere. They're sticking real hard to the ground. Honestly, the arms look better like that. But anyway, those are the main poses. Those are how you do the in-betweens. Don't pay attention to the arms. That's not a good tutorial. Arms are up to you. You can make them jaunty. You can make them swingy. You can make them rigid. Whatever you want to do. I'll show my other walk cycle in case that one looks better. So here's my other walk cycle that I did with the arms a little bit more accurate. Looks a little bit better. But also that front leg is not as snappy as in the other one. But those arms are definitely better. So anyway, you wouldn't have to redraw each frame. You would just say, okay, this is the front leg, and now it's back here. Front leg, I'm tracking the front leg. There. So it's basically both parts of it, and then you would just shade based on your lighting rather than having to draw it twice. And I'll do something else. I will track the flow of the motion of this walk cycle, so you can get a good idea of how the overall head movement will work. Is that it's a bit of an S curve. It goes forward and down. It's pretty regular, almost like a wavelength or a waveform. So something to keep in mind, maybe you could, if you're more mathematically inclined, you might play around with it based on these waveforms. So maybe putting that closer together, decreasing that waveform length, maybe that would look a little bit different. That might look fast-paced. You could stretch it out, make it a much longer stride. I'm not sure, I've never done that. Something to consider if you're more mathematically inclined, and maybe that makes more sense to you. I'm just trying to throw a bunch of stuff at you and see what sticks, and you can figure out which of those ways of tearing this apart would help you understand it best. That's all I'm here to do. Anyway, I will say overall that I encourage you to play around with this. You can do a lot with this. You can deliver certain emotions. You can give context to a character's thought process of things just through their walk cycle. You can deliver a personality. There's world building you can do with just the walk cycle, and I encourage you to do that. So play around with it, see what actions deliver what emotions. That's the joy of animation, is you get to play around, and it's very fun. Because I can only say so much to deliver what it is. I can even show you so much. But until you do it for yourself, you won't really get the full idea of what I mean. I think somebody who's making something is the most in touch with what is happening. In getting into it, you are so fully aware of what is happening that only you can say when something looks perfect, and only you can admit when something looks terrible. And I can admit that the arms look terrible, but I encourage you to do this for yourself so you know exactly what it is, how it feels. And you just know, you can feel, oh, that's a little off. So I'll fix it. And then fix it. I will say, if you really wanted to, you could, instead of doing it on 2s, you could go and do it on 1s, and then you'd have to draw 16 individual frames, but it would look a lot more smooth. I'm not going to do that. I think if you can get something on 2s done well, I think you can deliver something just as well on 2s as you could on 1s. If you're struggling with this, I suggest that you separate each body part into different sections. Just do the head on one layer, do the torso on another, do the legs, maybe even separate front and back leg onto different layers, just so you can isolate that motion, see what it is that you're missing, because maybe it's just the idea of all of them moving at once isn't clicking, and you have to see how they move individually to figure out how they move together. Just as an idea, if you're struggling. But it is important to note that they do move in tandem. If one part moves, something will respond. If the torso is dropping down, the head drags with the torso. If the leg bearing the load of the body starts moving upward, the torso has to move with it, or else it wouldn't be load-bearing. The arms move, they're pinned to the shoulders, so clearly they have to follow the torso. The dragging leg that isn't supporting anything has to follow the torso as well, or you'd fall down. So just keep in mind that everything is connected. If this was too easy for you, I have some bonus challenges. Maybe you want to just isolate the head and make that do something different while the rest of the body is doing the same action. So maybe the head is rolling around on the neck, maybe it's swaying side to side, maybe the arms are just entirely acting as secondary actions and they're basically just little capes that are flowing behind the character. You could do that just to further isolate certain parts that you want to exaggerate, the legs, the head, the torso, whatever. Maybe they waddle while they walk. Their gait is not straight up and down. Maybe they go side to side, which would be kind of hard to convey in 2D, but you could do it. I've seen it done. For extra difficulty, I would challenge you to try to convey an emotion just through the walk cycle. Don't make them say anything, don't add sound, but just through their stepping or their posture. I would recommend you not do facial features because that's a little bit of cheating if you're just saying outright this person's angry. But if you can get it with the posing, you know, I would think an angry person would probably lean forward, hunch over a little bit, maybe arms stationary but legs very animated, for lack of a better term. Maybe they're sad, maybe their head is droopy and their body is dragging, their legs are kind of trailing along behind them. Maybe their arms are touching the ground. Just examples of how you could convey an emotion if you want to do that for extra difficulty. I would try and nail this first. That's just me. Something else, you could try and do the double step, which is like the cliche Mickey Mouse type cartoon walk cycle where they would bob their head twice. So for the double step, on the contact and the passing, the head would be in the same position, either up or down, and then on the up and the down, the head would be either. On the contact and the passing, the head would be up. On the down and the up, the head would be down. Or vice versa, you could do the up and the down, the head is down. On the contact and the passing, the head is up. But the double step being that the head doesn't move in this flowing line, it moves double time. Additionally, you could try a run cycle, which is very close to a walk cycle, but oftentimes it's only 4 frames and it would be those extremes. Now, the extremes would be different poses. I will draw them out. The extremes would be more horizontal. Actually, when you're running, your head moves up and down less than it does when you're walking. Fun fact. So you'd be a little bit more like this, more hunched down, but your up and down would be, I would say, really not that different. Just as a rough example, I would study reference. Maybe I'll make a run cycle, a short run cycle video after this. But for an extreme challenge, I would say that you should try to create a character's persona just with that. So rather than just an emotion, convey maybe who they are as a character. Maybe they got some swagger. Maybe they don't care. Maybe they're always happy, but it's not like overtly happy. It's just like they're whistling, they're humming a tune, they're doing the double step. Simple things like that, just to consider when building character, because I am tired of watching things where it is expressly told to me through dialogue what is happening, and it's just really boring. So I wish that people would take into account character building outside of dialogue. And I'm trying to instill that in future generations so that they know that that's really annoying, and that they should be aware of the fact that you can be telling the story without saying exactly what it is, because that's boring. Anyway, I think that's all I have for today. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.